Hello, welcome to Carnell Knowledge. My name is Tom Carnell. This is a show I do 3 times a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, in which I review, recommend 5 movies, a book, and 5 records, all of which I sort of have come across in the last few days, maybe a week or so. I watch a lot of movies. I watch like 2, 3 a day. My whole day is occupied with music, and to sort of take a break from that, I read. So the gist of this show is to share things with you in which may have slipped through the cracks. A lot of other people on YouTube and on social media don't talk about a lot of this stuff. And I think it's worthwhile. And I don't want to see it go away. I don't want to see it not get addressed. And who knows, you may find something that you enjoy and want to add to your collections. If you go into the description of this video, you will find links. I've included links to either trailer films or full movies of the movies I talk about, Amazon page link to the books, and full YouTube playlists for all the records. So don't take my word for it. Go down there and take a snoop around. You never know what you might find. I want to provide as much information as I can to you. I worked as a buyer for a record factory and tower and warehouse for many years. I was a publisher of a dark art publication called Carpe Noctem. I wrote for Fangoria and Dread Central for 15 years. Did a bunch of podcasts. I've been in this since probably the mid 80s. And now I'm an author. You can go to my Amazon page and pick up a bunch of stuff. There are short story collections and novels and interview books. And today I'm getting the ISBN for my latest book called Open Late, but I'm sure I'll be talking about that a little later. Okay, so all that business taken care of. Let's get on to our list of today's movies. The first one, from 2021. It's a documentary. Tubi has some great documentaries that you can find. I've talked about a few of them here, and this next one is one of them. It's called Hollywood in the Atomic Age: Monsters, Martians, Mad Scientists. It's directed by Mark Gilman. And it is essentially talking about films from the 40s, 50s, and 60s that had to do with the atomic age. The film is, like a lot of these, are made up of talking heads and extremely short clips. It's kind of odd where it clicks now and again in the narration. It's written out, and then they just read it to you, which I thought was kind of weird. But it's an enjoyable documentary. The films talked about, there's a sort of very innocence to them. They mostly deal with, like I say, in the 50s and 60s. But it's a fascinating documentary. It's a little long, but it's well researched and well made, and it goes sort of in depth into a bygone era. I think it's a terrific entry point if you have a desire to learn more about these kinds of films. This is a great place to start. It gives you a lot of titles. It covers them pretty quickly, and at least it'll give you something to, write into your, like, I keep a notebook on all this stuff where when I hear about something that I think may be of interest, I scribble it down so I don't forget it. But yeah, it's a very cool documentary. You can find it all over the place. Again, Hollywood in the Atomic Age. Moving on to our second film, as is well documented on this show, I'm a big Mario Bava guy, and I always seem to not do a lot of rewatching of a 1970 film called Il Rosso Segno della Follia, aka Hatchet for a Honeymoon. It stars Stephen Forsyth, Dagmar Lasseter, who is in Devilfish and The Laughing Woman, and Laura Betti, who is in Fellini's La Dolce Vita. There's a ton of names that you can find associated with this. An Axe for a Honeymoon, Blood Brides, the Red Wedding Night, Red Sign of Madness. It's basically about a guy who murders brides. He's a photographer and a bridal gown designer. And whenever one of his models seems to come up and go, oh, well, I'm out of here, I'm going to go get married, he murders her. It's kind of very loosely based on Psycho. Bava's son, Lamberto Bava, was an assistant director on this. And the plot is a little convoluted and a little over complicated. But man, it's a Bava film, so you know you're going to get some beautiful shots and some wonderful lighting. And man, does Bava know color and setting. Just great stuff. This is a film that's often referred to as a giallo, but it's really more akin to a slasher. And if you're a longtime viewer of this show, I talk a lot about the sort of metamorphosis of these kinds of films, from like noir to the German krimi to the Italian giallo to the Spanish giallo. And then ultimately it finds its way to our shores in America as the American slasher film. The production on this, I understand, was filled with tension and location difficulties. They had to stop filming at one point because the money ran out. And then there was all sorts of stuff going on with, once they found that they could get Laura Betty's in on it as the wife, it sort of threw the production into a whole tizzy where some people's parts were diminished, her part was increased. They did a lot of reshoots and that kind of a thing. The filming, like I say, had to take a hiatus when the money ran out. It was completed and not released for a year. And then once it finally came out, it was ignored by critics and the public alike. There's a very interesting score to it by Santa Maria Romatelli, and it really adds, sort of helps the mood of everything. It's interesting, the Spanish villa used in the film belonged to Generalissimo Francisco Franco, the dictator in Spain. There's some aspects of not only Psycho, but also American Psycho. The man is affluent, and he sort of uses it to hide his crimes. One thing I noticed is the main character wears a lot of cravats, which I thought is really weird. It's that, remember Freddy from Scooby-Doo? He always had that scarf around his neck, but this guy has them in spades. So it's like every scene he's wearing a different colored cravat, and it's a little slightly different in style. Let's see, the film would later be reworked in the American slasher He Knows You're Alone from 1980. I think overall this is one of Bava's weaker films. It's not Blood and Black Lace. It's not Whipping the Body. It's more of him. It felt like him trying to recapture the magic, and then to be met with all of these difficulties surely had something to do with the outcome. Overall, I think the film is stylish, albeit muddled affair, with scenes that are lush and beautifully constructed, but ultimately it's all window dressing for a shitty script. So there you go. Moving up next, our next film from 1972, La Polizia Ringrazia, aka Execution Squad, directed by a guy with a one-word moniker, Steno, aka Stefano Vanzini. He was mostly known for doing Bud Spencer comedies, and that doesn't make a lot of sense. It stars Enrico Maria Salerno from Argento's Bird with a Crystal Plumage, Maria Angelo Mulatto, who played Kala in the 1980 Flash Gordon, the one with the Queen soundtrack. Mario Adorf is in it. He was in Tin Drum, and he was also in Bird with the Crystal Plumage. The synopsis, as we say around here, is as follows. An inspector pursues a secret society of former police officers who go beyond the law by killing notorious criminals without trial. And if you think to yourself, wow, that sounds like the Dirty Harry movie Magnum Force, you're right. It also reminded me of the Star Chamber, the Michael Douglas thing, where the secret court of judges would pass sentence on guys that had slipped through the cracks. It's considered to be the initiator of the Polizia subgenre, the Italian crime thriller. And there's a great score by, anytime I see a film score by Stelvio Cipriani, get it. You know it's going to be great, and this is no exception. It has a lot more on its mind than just cops and robbers, which most Polizia do. This has a lot more to do with a common theme in some of these. The system doesn't work, and the only way we can keep our citizens safe is to go beyond the law and take it into our own hands, a sort of vigilante thing. The vibe of the film is very, very 70s, and the acting is about what you'd expect. A lot of lantern-jawed heroes snarling and pulling their guns and slapping people and that kind of thing. The direction and script are solid, although, like I say, the script, it's all a little yappy, a little of this stuff for too long. Some of it doesn't make a lot of sense, but the action is realistic and exciting. And there is a death in here that I'm not going to get too specific about, but it has to do with a woman being dragged that is wild. You're kind of rocking along, and you've accepted this level of violence, and then this death happens, and man alive, it is pretty jaw-dropping. I like this subgenre. I think that it's got its charm. You know, I grew up on things like French Connection and those kind of things. So, you know, you like what you like. Overall, though, I think this is it works kind of as a prototype for the genre that's going to be duplicated again and again and again and again. And in the coming days and weeks, we're going to be talking a lot about some of that stuff. There's a great documentary on YouTube also as a sidebar called Eurocrime that you can watch. Again, it's a lot of talking heads and that kind of thing, but it really goes in deep into a lot of this stuff and talks about why it was popular. But again, you can find it on YouTube. I'm sorry, on Tubi. In comparison to some of the crime films of today, it does come off a little trite and a little naive. But again, this was made back in the early 70s, so you got to give it a break. But again, it's called Execution Squad, and I do recommend it. And it's a great place to start if you want to know more about the Polizia subgenre. Up next, 1965. This is a film called IREZUMI ICHIDAI. It's a Japanese film, aka Tattooed Life. It's directed by Seijun Suzuki, who did a lot of classic stuff. Branded to Kill, Pistol Opera, Tokyo Drifter, and one of my favorite titles of all time, Detective Bureau 2-3, Go to Hell, Bastards. Stars Hideki Takahashi, Masako Izumi, Yuji Odaka, and Kotobuki Hanamoto. The synopsis is about after his own gang sets him up to kill a rival mobster, a hitman is forced to flee with his younger brother. It's sort of a tale of family versus loyalty. The brother of as a sibling, and the brother of the Yakuza family, for want of a better word. In a world that revolves pretty solidly around men, this film has more to do, doesn't have more to do, but it has 3 women in it, 3 female characters that are great, that are very strong, and they're played phenomenally well. This film, along with Branded to Kill, was sort of the breaking point of Suzuki's relationship with the studio Nakatsu. They had kind of had enough of his shit trying to inject, they're like, just give us a crime film. We just want a crime film. And he's like, wait, I've got this whole other subplot that I want to talk about. And this and Branded to Kill, they were like, okay, we're done, and stop working. They would stop working together. A phrase that I learned in the course of my research for this that I thought was really interesting was Ninkyo Iega, stands for Honorable Yakuza. And there's a subgenre of these kind of Yakuza films, and then there's this whole other not lower, but it's other subgenre of the Honorable Yakuza. It's the man who does right, but in the end is still screwed and usually ends up dying. The score is really interesting. It's a harpsichord juxtaposed with a saxophone. Let's see. There's a couple of things they do that I think are really, really interesting, where you see a man coming in and out of the scenes, and he's wearing these red shoes. It's kind of like the red dress in Schindler's List, where it draws the eye. And so every time you see it, you know that in this case, trouble isn't far behind. But it's a nice identifier that really helps as you sort of wend your way through everything. The film sort of begins with this explosion of violence, this murder that gets this guy sort of the setup that gets him on the run, and then at the end there's a big splash piece as well, done in color, in different washes of color, that really reminded me of the end of if you remember the ending of Kill Bill 2, where they cut to all of these just shadows and in splashes of blue and red and that kind of thing. It also, the ending scene reminded me of the hallway fight in Old Boy. Let's see. It's recommended for people who want to know more about Seijun Suzuki and also more about Yakuza films. It's good stuff. I thoroughly enjoyed it and plan to be watching a few more Yakuza films. Spoiler. Let's see. Our last film, I'm going to cheat. And wow, I'm kind of losing the light here. I mentioned two films that I think are important. There are a couple more in this series, but these ones I want to talk about specifically. One is from 1955. Both of these are directed by Val Guest, who directed things like The Camp on Blood Island and The Day the Earth Caught Fire. The first one is called The Creeping Unknown, aka The Quatermass Experiment. And then the other one is Quatermass 2, aka Enemy from Space. They both starred Brian Dunleavy, who is in Beau Geste, and he stars as the titular Dr. Quatermass. And let's see, for Quatermass Experiment, the synopsis is: Professor Bernard Quatermass's manned rocket ship returns to Earth. But two of the astronauts are missing, and the survivor seems ill and unable to communicate. The film, both of these are sort of a cornerstone of mid 50s going into the 60s science fiction. They were big, very popular in England, and then they came to America. One sidebar I read was that when the first film played stateside in 1956, parents of a boy named Stuart Cohen attempted to sue the Lake Theater where it was playing, and also United Artists, because their son had an aneurysm in the middle of the film, and they were trying to blame the film, and it was ultimately decided that the film wasn't to blame per se, but the boy had a predisposition to the aneurysm, and the film might have helped in that it ratcheted up tension, but I think that's all. We're going to go along. You move from that. But this is a classic bit of science fiction. And the second film has to do with Quatermass trying to gather support for his lunar colonization project. But he's intrigued by mysterious traces that have been showing up. It's believed the first film to ever use the Arabic number 2 in the title. let's see. And both of these are Hammer films, by the way. So that sort of also helps define the aesthetic. Let's see. One thing I found funny, that in between takes, the main character, Brian Dunleavy, he wears a toupee. And because they were constantly around airplanes and wind machines and this kind of thing, his toupee kept blowing off, which is somehow comedic to me. Let's see. Both of them I highly recommend. If you're into science fiction, you've undoubtedly seen these already. If not, get on it. These things are sort of seminal science fiction tales. Books. I'm going to cheat again and mention 2 books in the effort of in a desire for expediency. The first one is this, Frank O'Rourke's Gun Hand, released in 1953. Synopsis is, after his escaping jail, John McCabe sets out to find the man who killed his partner. With a redhead at his side and a gun in his hip, he rises to the challenge, and all hell breaks loose. It's a fairly standard outing for O'Rourke. My love of Frank O'Rourke is pretty well documented. The action is gritty, it's realistic. It's not too terribly high on my list of O'Rourke titles, of which there's like 53 novels, but they're all short. They're all like 120, 140 pages. But I think this writer is a high watermark in the Western genre. So his stuff is hard to find because there hasn't been a resurgence of it, which really I don't get. If I was king of the forest, there would be whole volumes of Frank O'Rourke books. Let's see. The year after Gun Hand, this came out. It's called High Vengeance. This is much better than Gun Hand. This one really I very much enjoyed. Synopsis says, let's see. Brian could smell violence in the air when he rode in. The whole town was packing iron. The high country was about to explode in a bloody struggle for land. And he hires himself out because he's looking for a woman who met his father, sort of latched onto him, married him, drove him, and ultimately his father dies while he's away. So when he comes back, he's looking for a little vengeance, hence the title. And there's a whole land war thing happening, and he goes to work for her ranch, and a whole lot of other stuff happens. Very cool, very well written. This is a prime example of why. This, in his book Mule for the Marquesa, sort of sums up the attraction there. It is kind of weird. They keep referring him to Brian, B-R-Y-A-N, and I thought that was weird. Like, you don't hear about a lot of Brians in the Old West, and then you realize, it took me a minute to realize that they keep calling him by his last name. His name is like Jim Bryan or something like that. As usual, the book's descriptions and his characterizations are fantastic. You feel like you really know these people. And the plot does get a little convoluted, but it lands well. And by the end of it, there's a real sense of like everything's going to be okay, kind of a thing. That the man, that Brian, has gone through his trial by fire and now is able to finally achieve sort of peace. Great stuff. Great stuff. Every time I go to a bookstore, my first thing is to look for Frank O'Rourke books that I don't have. That and books by Earl Stanley Gardner under the pseudonym A.A. Fair. Let's get on to records. I got a few here that are pretty groovy. The first one is actually, again, I'm cheating with 2. There's a band out of New Orleans. They were founded in 1975 at Loyola University. They're called Woodenhead. And they the first record is called Perseverance, and the other record is called Live at TIPITINA'S. Perseverance was out in 2005, and Live at TIPITINA'S was out in 2015. They are a band, a quartet that blends progressive rock, funk, fusion, and classical influence. They describe themselves as a cerebral sonic assault. Their debut record, one very cool, was directed or produced by Alan Toussaint, the great New Orleans performer. And in a nutshell, it reminded me a lot of, number one, the Dixie Dregs. Number two, Steve Morse. Reminded me a little of the Courtney Pine Band, Bolito, the Mark Lee Band, the guitarist Jimmy Herring. Great stuff. Had never heard of this. Picked it up from one of the Crate Diver videos that I watch periodically. And they had described it like, oh, this sounds like the Dixie Dregs. And I thought, no way. These guys sound like the Dixie Dregs. And it's great stuff. So again, Woodenhead, pretty much anything you find by them is going to be top drawer. So check that out. Second record is from 2018. It's a self-titled record from a band called Galasphere 347. The self-titled record is their debut record. They're sort of Anglo-Scandinavian prog supergroup. Light John Anderson vocals with sort of Genesis complexity. It's prog, but non-prog folks won't feel alienated by it. I really enjoyed this record. It reminded me of a list of things: Ellesmere, the Amber Light, White Willow, Anglergard, Starcastle, Genesis, yes, Steve Hackett, and Glasshammer. I enjoyed this record. Again, go to the description of this video and you can click on a link to a playlist and you can judge for yourself. But yeah, these guys were great. Didn't see them coming. It came upon my desk. I forget how. Yeah, check them out. Galasphere 347. Up next, an Italian-Sicilian symphonic prog space rock band called Malibran. The album in particular is from 2020, and it's called TRACCE, Revisited Songs. This is a band where sax, flute, and guitar are predominant. The vocals here seem to be kind of a weak link, but it's Italian symphonic prog, and good stuff, enjoyable. Reminded me of Kaizen, Codabel, Minimum Vital, reminded me of Goblin, a lot of Goblin, Locanda della Fate, Camel, because of the flute, I'm going to say Jethro Tull, and also PFM, Premiata Fornieri Marconi. Thoroughly enjoyable stuff. And again, if you're not into prog, then try them, because it just may surprise you. Our next record is from 1980. Hilton Felton is the artist's name. The album is called Man for All Reasons. This is jazz-related funk and soul. He was a stalwart of the Washington, D.C. jazz scene for years, played a ton of presidential inaugurations, or inaugural balls. It's funk and soul. It's the velveteen voice of our singer, and the band is just rock solid. This reminded me of a lot of things like Hubert Laws, the Crusaders, Harvey Mason, Ramsey Lewis, Bob James, Rodney Franklin, Roy Ayers. I kind of set up perimeters here so you know what we're bouncing around. And I like this record a lot. I had never heard of him. But unfortunately, again, it was from 1980. There's not a lot of his stuff out there, but you can find some of it on YouTube. Again, check the description. And then our last record is by a guy. This one's wild. His name is Rhythm Shaw. The album is from 2026. It's called Nothing to Lose. So in the course of my meanderings, I find Indonesian guitar players that are just burners. This guy is from Mumbai. He was classically trained in guitar, formerly trained on the tabla, touring internationally from the age of 19. and has collaborated with people like A.R. Rahman, Zakir Hussain, and Louise Banks. The music is very syncopated, and man, he's articulate as all get out. The rhythm section is rock solid, so that he's able to, it's a platform from which that he can get up there and just burn. Not exactly a shredder, if you know what I mean, the difference between like a burner and a shredder. A shredder is more like Yngwie Malmsteen kind of a thing. This is more melodic than that, but it's great stuff. It's part of that new generation of guitar players that just have done nothing but woodshed and learned scale after scale after scale after scale. Reminding me of things like EH3, Guthrie Govan, Stanley Clark, and Tosin Bussey. Good stuff all the way around. I sent this around to a couple of people in my circle, and everyone came back with the same thing, with like exclamation points and just like, oh my, where did this guy come from? But there's a ton of them, and I'm going to be covering a bunch of them in future episodes. So I'm running a little long here, and the light is playing havoc with what's happening. But anyway, that's today's show. I appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, go to the description, check all this stuff out. The world is a giant place, and there is so much good film, books, and music out there that people aren't talking about. So I'm going to keep trying to do that for you. So please try to do me a favor and like the video. By all means, subscribe. YouTube likes subscriptions. Watch to the end. You've already done that if you've gone this far. But I will be back on Wednesday. I've got a whole nother batch of stuff that we'll be talking about. So until then, have a good week.